The walk-off hit had just landed. Freddie Freeman's bat had done what Freddie Freeman's bat does in the moments that matter most. It found the baseball at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place, and sent Dodger Stadium into the kind of eruption that shakes the ground beneath your feet. Players poured out of the dugout. They ran toward Freeman with the pure, uncontrolled joy of men who had just been pulled back from the edge of defeat. Arms were raised. Helmets came off. The circle formed the way it always forms after a walk-off, instinctively, magnetically, everyone drawn toward the center of the moment. Everyone. Except for one person. While 50,000 people inside that stadium were on their feet, while his teammates were colliding in celebration behind him, while cameras were chasing the chaos of a walk-off win, Shohei Ohtani was walking in the opposite direction. Not toward the dugout. Not toward Freeman. Not toward the pile. Toward the umpires. He walked with the calm of a man who had somewhere specific to be and knew exactly why he was going there. He found umpire Jen Pawol near home plate. And then, in the middle of all that noise, in the middle of all that celebration, Shohei Ohtani did something that stopped people mid-cheer. He bowed. A brief conversation followed. Quiet words exchanged at the edge of a stadium losing its mind around them. Nobody could hear what was said. But everyone who saw it felt it. And here is what made it remarkable beyond anything a camera could fully capture. Earlier in that same game, Ohtani had struck out looking. On an ABS call. A call made not by Jen Pawol's eyes but by the automated ball-strike system that has quietly been changing the texture of the game. A call that ended his at-bat. A call that, by every measure, did not go in his favor. And yet here he was. Walking toward her. Bowing. Talking. Not with anger. Not with the residue of frustration that most players carry out of an at-bat that ended on a call they disagreed with. With something else entirely. Something that doesn't have a clean translation in the language of modern professional sports. Something that people, after the game, started calling simply Shohei Otaniness. To understand what made that bow so powerful, you have to sit inside the game that preceded it. It had not been a comfortable night for the Dodgers. The kind of game that refuses to settle into a rhythm. The kind of game where the lead changes hands like something neither team can hold onto for long enough to breathe. Tension lived in every half inning. Every pitching change carried consequences. Every at-bat felt like it was auditioning for something bigger. Ohtani had been locked in all night. His presence at the plate carried the particular weight it always carries, the weight of someone the opposing pitching staff has no clean answer for. They worked around him carefully. They threw him sequences that were more about survival than strategy. They knew what he was capable of and they planned around it the way you plan around a weather system rather than a baseball player. And then came the at-bat that ended looking. The ABS system, the automated ball strike technology that has been integrated into this level of play, made the call. Not a human eye behind a mask. A system. A set of coordinates and measurements invisible to everyone in the stadium except the technology recording them. Strike 3. Ohtani stood at the plate for a moment. His eyes moved, not in the explosive way they had moved weeks earlier when a human umpire had raised his hand on a pitch clearly outside. This was different. This was the look of a man processing something he didn't agree with but understood the context of. The ABS system doesn't have intent. It doesn't have bias. It has measurements. He didn't slam his bat. He didn't say 3 words that cameras could read from a distance. He walked back to the dugout with the same quiet he carries into every moment that doesn't require noise. But something had registered. Something had been filed away. Not as grievous. As something more complicated than that. And it would surface again after the walk-off. In a way nobody in that stadium anticipated. Freddie Freeman has a gift for the dramatic that seems almost unfair given how consistent he already is in the quieter moments of a baseball season. The walk-off hit arrived in the way walk-off hits arrive when they are truly earned, not as a mistake by the opposing pitcher, not as a gift from a poorly executed sequence, but as the result of a battle. A real at-bat. The kind where both sides are giving everything they have and the outcome genuinely feels uncertain until the ball lands. When it landed, the stadium became something beyond loud. There is a kind of noise that doesn't feel like sound anymore. It feels like pressure. Like the air itself is vibrating. Freeman's walk-off produced that kind. The kind that travels through your chest rather than your ears. The celebration was immediate and total. Players who had been watching from the dugout rail with the particular tension of men invested in every pitch suddenly had nowhere to put all that energy except toward Freeman. The circle formed. The noise continued. The kind of moment that gets replayed and remembered and talked about for the rest of a season. And in the middle of all of it, walking quietly in a different direction entirely, was Shohei Ohtani. Jen Pawol was near home plate when Ohtani reached her. She had worked the game with the professionalism her position demands. The ABS call that had ended Ohtani's at-bat was not her call in the traditional sense, the system made it. But she was the face of the umpiring crew that night. She was the person standing behind home plate when the strike was registered. She was the person Ohtani had looked at, briefly, without drama, when the at-bat ended. Now Ohtani was walking toward her. Not with the body language of confrontation. Not with the residue of an argument looking for a place to finish itself. With something open. Something that people watching from the stands described afterward as almost disarming in how unexpected it was. He stopped in front of her. He bowed. The bow was not deep in the way a formal Japanese bow carries ceremony. It was the bow of acknowledgement. Of respect offered genuinely and without performance. The kind of gesture that in Japanese culture communicates something that English doesn't have a single clean word for, a recognition of another person's humanity, their effort, their presence in a shared moment. A brief conversation followed. Nobody heard the words. Cameras caught the image but not the sound. What was exchanged between them in those 30 or 40 seconds belongs to the two of them and the quiet that existed in that small space despite everything roaring around it. But those who were close enough to watch described Paul's response as warm. Surprised, perhaps. But warm. And then Ohtani turned and walked toward his celebrating teammates. The clip traveled fast. In the age of 1,000 cameras and instant sharing, a moment like this doesn't stay inside a stadium for long. Within minutes of the final out, the footage was moving, from broadcast replays to phones in the stands to social media timelines across multiple continents. Japan saw it first, in the way Japan always sees Ohtani first. The reaction there was not surprise. It was recognition. The bow is not unusual in Japanese culture. But its appearance in this context, in the middle of a Major League Baseball celebration, directed at an American umpire, by the most famous Japanese athlete alive, carried something that went beyond cultural gesture. It carried character. American baseball fans who had watched Ohtani for years but had never seen this specific version of him reacted with something between admiration and genuine emotion. Comments filled with the particular reverence people reserve for moments that remind them why sport can still be beautiful when the right person is playing it. Former players weighed in. Managers weighed in. People with no connection to baseball whatsoever weighed in, because the gesture translated beyond the sport. It translated into something simply human. You can be struck out by a call you disagree with. You can sit with that frustration through an entire game. You can watch your teammate win the game without you having contributed the way you wanted to contribute. And you can still walk toward the umpire after it's over, not to relitigate, not to demand, not to make yourself the center of a story that belongs to someone else, and simply acknowledge her. That is what people were watching when they watched that clip. The phrase started appearing in post-game coverage with the particular inevitability of a description that fits so well nobody can resist using it. Shohei Otaniness. It is easy to define it by its surface elements. The bow. The quiet after the strikeout. The choice to walk away from the celebration toward something smaller and more personal. Those are the visible parts. But what sits underneath them is harder to articulate and more important to understand. Ohtani operates from a set of values that were clearly established long before he became the most talked-about player in baseball. Values around respect, for the game, for the people who work within it, for opponents, for officials, for the structures that make competition possible even when those structures produce outcomes that hurt you personally. The ABS call ended his at-bat. He didn't like it. Anyone who watched his face in that moment understood that he didn't like it. But he also understood something that takes most people a lifetime to learn and some never learn at all. How a moment ends is not the same as what the moment means. His at-bat ended on a strike call. That is how it ended. But what it meant, how he chose to carry it, what he chose to do with it afterward, that part belonged to him entirely. And what he chose was the bow. What he chose was 30 seconds with Jen Pawol at home plate while his teammates celebrated behind him. What he chose was a gesture that had nothing to do with winning or losing and everything to do with who he is when the game is over and the cameras are pointed somewhere else. Except this time, one camera was pointed at him. And what it caught was everything. Freeman's walk-off will be remembered for this game. The celebration will be remembered. The noise of 50,000 people finding its full voice at once will be remembered. But the image that traveled furthest. The image that landed in places baseball rarely reaches. The image that made people who had never watched a full inning of baseball stop scrolling and feel something. Was a man walking away from the celebration. Quietly. With purpose. Toward an umpire near home plate. A brief bow. A shorter conversation. An acknowledgement offered with no audience in mind and received with what looked, from a distance, very much like gratitude. That was Shohei Ohtani-ness. Not a home run. Not a strikeout. Not a statistic that fits inside a box score. Just a man, in the loudest moment of the night, choosing the quietest possible thing. And meaning every single word of it.